Gabe, great to have you.
Yeah, great to be here.
So fantastic. So we have starting recording while Brazil is playing Croatia in the World Cup. It's perfect timing to arrange this interview, isn't it? Still zero, still nil
Almost
nil.
90 minutes. It's
All
still
right.
nil, still 0-0. 90 minutes in.
Okay, good. So, keep an eye on it. I don't have a TV here, so if they score, we can just have a look. As I said, my
If they score, I will scream.
that's good.
Is that
That's
okay?
perfectly fine. We want this to be natural. My wife is from Croatia, so I feel like we are kind of playing against each other, but
No, it's all
it's all
friends. It's all
friends. Yeah,
friends.
my boss is from Brazil. One of the two bosses I have. So
Yeah,
there
there
you
you
go.
go.
It's a small world. Anyway, so it's great to have you. As I said, you're an interesting guy. I follow your background, and I check out your work, and I have great expectations for our chat today. No pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that um, things don't get, notifications, that kind of
Oh
thing
yeah,
too.
that's a good
Not
idea.
disturbing it.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
we had any sort of things like Amazon deliveries and cats running in, dogs, so it's all part of life, and that's what that we want to show real life stuff because believe it or not, and I know you know this, but a lot of people don't. Is scientists are actually normal people. Yeah.
Yeah, we are. But and I actually this is a something that I try to externalize about myself. That I like music a lot and how that impacts my way of thinking about science and how I'm a regular normal person and that includes like having all the flaws that we all have, right? And that's something that I feel like sometimes people try to hide, and I don't think that's ideal. We should bring a whole person to whatever we bring
Oh,
in
totally.
life.
And in science, is you're right. Maybe somebody doesn't want to let it transpire, but in some cases, it's just impossible to get through because all you see is a name on a paper, right? On an article, and if you are not in that very same field, then you get the chance to actually meet people face to face at events, conferences, or whatever. It's just impossible, right? And that's what from our perspective, or at least for mine, it's kind of missing in science. There is this connection between the people and the science. And if it's something that we want to explore in this podcast, is usually this, and it's always a very interesting journey. Is saying, how the people you are can influence the science you do, right? And it's it, very often it comes across very clearly. It's very obvious. And by the way, clearly you like music because I can see a guitar just behind you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a bit more space in this office, so I left this base here. Sometimes like I yeah, I plug in on computer and play here. But at home I have a synthesizer and guitar. I've been playing since I was like 14, and now that I have like my own space at work that I can personalize and make it my own, and had this much space, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have uh, some instruments
Do you
there.
just play in your free time, or you play when you think, or do you also just perform? What is that for you?
Uh, I unfortunately I don't perform. I don't have a band. I used to when I was a
Mhm.
teenager, and it's one of the things that I miss the most in my life. To be very honest with you, because um, and to me it has a link with being a scientist, right? Because when you perform and you play with your bandmates of other people, there's this unspoken communication between everyone
Mhm.
that's playing about what's going on there. Everyone is contributing to something bigger than the unit, And I think that like when we go and try to do science as interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary is the one that we try to do in my group, um, it's very similar. And of course, without the part that we do speak a lot with each
Yeah.
other, but it's similar in that way, in my opinion.
But it's what people call the
So
chemistry, right? Hey, we are speaking about chemistry, we are in chemistry, which just makes everything more confusing. But it's the people chemistry, isn't it?
yeah, it is. It is. It's the chemistry amongst peers that shows up in music and, in my opinion, in also in the best science that we can have. Science is made by people, right? Like there's no way around it. So we should not try to uh, not bring our whole selves into the conversation.
Definitely, and bringing the people out makes it more approachable and more funny, right? Because a lot of
Yeah.
people who are not from a scientific background, they tend to be scared of science. This is one of the worst thing for the field, in my opinion, because you end up being in this sort of ivory tower, just speaking among peers, and the outside world is kind of there, right? And that's and even if this is not true, that's the perception, unfortunately, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is this missing link between the personalities and then the work.
Yeah, but you know what? When you have a Nobel laureate in chemistry that used to play with Tom Morello, I think that is about time
I get
that
it.
we don't uh, we don't try to isolate these things anymore. Of course, I'm speaking of Karen Bertozzi, uh, Nobel Prize in Chemistry for this year. Big fan of Carolyn way before the Nobel. Can I say this like as in like before she was cool? She's always been
Yeah, of
super cool.
course. Well, she's a big name, and so many guests
Yeah,
of our podcasts have got something to do with her, or been inspired by her, or have worked with her, or look at her as a mentor or as a role model, and um, yeah, she's an incredible character for sure.
for sure, and an inspiration to me for sure.
So you're
Yeah,
saying that we are trending in the right direction. So we are humanizing chemistry, are we?
yeah, I think so. I think that lots remains to be done with regards to having a more diverse, a more inclusive space in our field, and that in my thinking is about
Yeah.
humanizing it. And it's kind of paradoxical when I speak about it because at the same time my research is a lot about trying to bring more computers and
Rationalize things. Yeah.
less,
Yeah.
yeah, into chemistry and make it less of um, a human biased situation. But the different parts of different
It
problems do
still
exist.
requires creative thinking, right, and a human approach to the problem at the very least, right? Then you can let your computer, yeah,
Tons.
run the problem, but it's looking at things from a different angle is what makes great science happen, isn't it?
Tons. There's no way. Uh, we all talk a lot about how we're going to make chemistry. At least that's how I think, and how here at CMU we've been thinking how to make the physical sciences more digital. Um, but one thing that I like to be clear is that there's no way of doing that without having a strong human component that guides the solution of those problems.
And this is a good segue because as I said, we are already kind of indirectly exploring the human component of yourself in the scientist you are. But I think we can go a bit deeper, a bit more in a bit more structured way. You have an interesting
Yeah.
path, right, to your current position because you were born in Brazil and you work internationally. You've been in the U.S., in Canada, now back in the US. I mean, this I'm interested, right? I'm sure there's a ton you learn from the experience. Um, even knowing how it is to pass a winter in Toronto as a native of Rio de Janeiro, that's kind of interesting to hear from you. So I let you start from wherever you want.
Yeah, sure. I really come from this really, really small town in the countryside of Rio de Janeiro state. And back then when I was playing guitar in a band and also doing a chemistry technician course during my high school, that's a thing that's common there. I had the opportunity to go to the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro for a week-long series of mini courses where you learn, all sorts of things. And it was really cool because it was the first time that I saw a university, but also first time seeing people that looked like, like me and regular Joe uh, roaming those spaces. And before then, you'd think that like, oh, these scientists are, Schrödinger and you know, Einstein and whatnot. And you see these people and you're like, wow, that's interesting. And but that was complex because no one in my family had gone to college. So it was not like really something that we talked too much about. But um, I kept asking questions that my professors in this technician course would say, you learned that in college. I was like, okay. So I started to study and to get to college, and I went to college, and um, first week there was this guy who comes in, puts Schrodinger's equation on the board. It was like second day of college, and he's like, all the chemistry is in this equation. All you need to do is solve it. And in all of my naivete, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. How does that work? And it's like, little did I know that it was way more complex than that. But his course was all about trying to understand what happens when molecules in different geometries will impact their energies and reactivity at that first semester. This guy, his name is Pierre Esteves, and I started to work with him and on that year doing computational chemistry, my very first year in college. And he was a person that was traveled. He had done part of his PhD in France at University of Strasbourg. He had done his postdoc at Southern California with University of Southern California with Nobel laureate George Ola, and he had like this big way of inspiring us to ask deep questions, and also just like careful with what you dream about because it might become true. You'd say that. At this point, Brazil was going through a really amazing period and had a program that would send undergrads and grad students across the world. And I had the opportunity to go to Portugal, where I stayed there for a year doing part of my undergrad. That's when I did like a lot of a lot of classes, and also a lot of research, just studying how to make graphene oxides or reduce graphene oxides for electrodes in the lab, and experimentally. But went back to Brazil to finish my undergrad, and during my undergrad, I started doing most computational chemistry, but also some experimental chemistry. Um, and then what happened was, what, when I was in my undergrad in Brazil, there was a student from Florida State University and her PI that she was Brazilian. They did a tour in Brazil talking about Florida State University, and they had this program called LASER, Latin American Scholar Education Research, something like that. That they would pick about 4 people from Latin America to go to Florida State Chemistry Department for 2 months, and they would fully fund this person to do research. And I I applied and I ended up going. Um, I remember putting on my my options to work with Harry Kroto, Nobel laureate in chemistry for fullerenes, and Harry was not taking graduate students at that point, so he would not take me. But um, the second option was this uh, Russian professor who, a Russian-born professor who also did physical organic chemistry, named Igor Alabugin. So I went and I arrived there. Before I arrived, I started to communicate with Igor and his group, and started to try to solve problems already. I was very eager to like get there and do this. My dream was to go to the US and pursue a PhD, and I went there and worked worked. It was great, and for those 2 months we had my first two papers,
Oh wow.
and then I went back for my
Hmm.
PhD, and we were quite prolific. It was a great time. Igor and I had a really interesting sense of what. Like, was this idea again of playing a band, right? Like, we really knew each other and how to pass the next part to each other, and we worked really fast and solved a lot of puzzles, which was great. Igor was a deep thinker and would always send me challenges, and I love that. Um, and but at the end of my PhD, I was um, seeing what was going on with computer science, specifically with machine learning, and I started to get really interested in the idea of how to augment chemistry with machine learning. And I looked around and I saw so many groups that were doing really innovative work. Um, Two that I would highlight are uh, Abigail Doyle, who was at Princeton at the time, and Alon Spurguzik, who was at Harvard at the time. And I applied to work with both of them, and it was a nail biter for me to choose which one I would go because they were both so amazing. Um, but in the end, I ended up choosing the one that I thought that would be most different from what I was doing and would put me in the most uncomfortable position, that I would have to learn a lot very fast. Um, and also because there were a bunch of other Latino folks in the group. So like I was like, okay, I went to Turku Falan, who then was moving to Toronto. So um, we get this. I am from Brazil, went to Portugal, then I went to
Florida,
the
yeah.
US, Florida, which
Well, all these places
is
are
not,
relatively warm, aren't they?
they're
Yeah.
all pretty warm. But here's the thing: people like to joke that I'm the least Brazilian they know because I actually do not like warm weather at all.
There you go.
Um, so moving to Toronto, it was awesome, right? Like, and we moved during the winter. So we drove from Florida to Toronto during the winter in December. I graduated December 14, 2018. And on December 15, 2018, we were on the road with our cat, our dog, and a U-Haul, my then fiance and I. And so we drove all the way there. And there was snow, and it was awesome. Um, adapting, it was not too hard. I really liked it. Um, so in Toronto, what was great was that I had the opportunity to work with people from really different fields. I was working with computer scientists, with physicists, with uh, you know uh, electrical engineers, and with mathematicians, and like people doing quantum computing. And you start to learn all of these different things. I had the opportunity to go and also do some work at the Vector Institute for Artificial Intelligence. And Alon has this really big, lofty questions that he wants to solve, and it's infectious, right? Like you were like, all right, let's do this together, and we got together to try to solve these big problems, and that was fantastic. And working with people from all over the world, I think it's critical, but especially work with people that that have different ways of thinking is critical, and that really influenced me going forward. And finally, coming back to the U.S., I love the U.S. I love it here. It's funny because by coincidence, my wife grew up in the suburbs of
Oh, she's
Pittsburgh and
back.
came back. Uh, yeah, so it's nice to be here, and Pittsburgh has really welcomed us, and Carnegie Mellon is such an amazing community, so strong in so many of those fields that are important to me. So it's really, really awesome.
It's an awesome story, Gabe. But there's a couple of takeaway from me. First of all, it seems to me that you are almost instinctively looking for challenges, right? Is it in your nature? Is it something you do consciously?
Well, I don't know. I get bored,
Uh-huh. Yeah, I thought it might be
and
the case.
um, and I usually want to be in situations that uh, I'm the dumbest person in the room. I think that's when we learn the most. So I like pursuing uh, new challenges. Um, of course, there are problems that have much longer time span, and we need to be focused on trying to solve those. Um,
But you can always break
but
them down in smaller pieces, right?
you can, and
You
you
should,
should,
yeah.
and we try to, and um, but that doesn't make them any less
No, of
challenging,
course.
right? Like you still need to solve the smaller pieces. Um, that was a great question, and the yeah, I think I drive myself towards that. You know,
Yeah, it feels like you've never thought about it properly.
yeah, I not really, no, and I don't. It's not like. By the way, I have a whole thing about like no BSing. I will just tell you what I think it's
I don't
the
expect anything
reality. And
less. And
yeah,
do you think you've
uh,
always been this way? Now that you're kind of thinking about it, right? You say, hey, yes, I probably get bored, so I instinctively go and try and stretch myself. You have what people define as a sort of growth mindset, right? And in most cases, it's a natural thing. You either have it or you don't, and it's hard to develop, right? There are people who like to stay in their comfort zone, and people who get nervous in their comfort zone and want to push out. You're the latter for sure, right? Have you ever been like that? Because in a way, at the very start, you don't have like an academic tradition in your family. You kind of had your opportunity, you caught them, right? Probably quite aggressively the way you describe it. It kind of happened to you. You feel you've been lucky, or if you stop and think and look back, say, hey, you know what? Maybe I was hunting for those opportunities all the time because of this reason, because I wanted to stretch myself. What do you think? There's some truth in this?
yeah. So I will absolutely say I am incredibly lucky, right? Like there's no way about it. We humans are biased, and we tend to think, oh, like everything that happened to me is because I made it happen. It's like, no, that's not
Of
true at all.
course.
Like a lot of it is it's just statistics.
But you need to be able to catch
But
your opportunity. Everybody's got an opportunity at some point, right? And a few people catch them, and a few others don't.
yeah, Igor used to have this line in his email signature that I think rubbed off wrong on some people, but whatever. And I don't remember exactly who said this first, so I apologize for that. But it was something along the lines of "the harder I try, the luckier I become,"
Yeah,
or something
yeah.
along those lines. And yeah, you have to create opportunities or try to in order to for luck to strike. Um, but I will say this is not just me. My mentors also have been
Yeah.
this way. I can say that that they have this, this uneasiness of like, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
What's the and I like that. I like to think about what comes
And it's
next.
always like that. Very most of the time there is one or more, sort of figures that are an inspiration and a sort of model to follow. And very often, you realize that you are thinking in a specific way because you see in them. Right? I say, oh, this resonates with me. Yeah, that's what I want, right? And then they kind of make it concrete and possible. Oh, I can actually pursue this, right? And perhaps something like living in 3, 4 different countries and doing work at international level becomes at reach, right? While before it was kind of maybe even scary or something you wouldn't even think about.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, we're having some deep questions here, and yeah, you're right. It's just that I never thought about it that way, right? And you are right. But another thing that I really like is to both like see what other fields are doing, and when I say other fields, I don't mean just like, oh, these folks in organic chemistry think about it this way. I By the way, I think of myself first as a physical organic chemist. That's how my PhD was, and then postdoc is machine learning, automation, and so on. But um, I like to go and see, for example, what people in design are thinking. Right, I really try to bring in design thinking into my way of thinking about research. I like to see what people in um, art are thinking. I like to see. So like this, I say this because
I'm sure music
this.
for you as well, right? And you're not the only one.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. But I say this because it started to me as like seeing what are people in computer science doing, and how can I
Yeah.
bring this to think about chemistry. And that's what we do here, yeah. But I really try to bring more into like, okay, how can we think about this in terms of policy? How is this
Yeah.
going to be something that
And
can be
I like you
policy?
going there because that would have been my other question, right? You mentioned a few times as you were describing your path, the sort of multidisciplinarity, right, of your experiences, which is obviously very important to you, the way you describe it, and it's like as a broader concept because you mentioned things even beyond science, which is what a lot of scientists, a lot of great scientists do all the time. And that was what actually fascinated me of your work. I mean, I look at some of your papers and stuff. Is how too often, in my experience, people focusing on computational chemistry or whatever flavors, they tend to kind of get fixated with problems that become a bit sterile, right? Um, eh, and or you say, does it even matter if a bond is at 23.2 or 33.25 degrees? What does this really mean? Besides that your force field or your algorithm is more or less precise. Is it really what kind of role this work has in the sort of real world, and I've seen this in theoretical chemistry very often. I've done some myself during my PhD, and the biggest the biggest, more theoretical computational chemistry work are the ones that are more connected to the actual real life chemistry, right? The sort of laboratory chemistry. And is there anything you can take from these simulations and results that I can actually bring to experimental practice? It feels like something that you keep in mind all the time, even for the more theoretical of your works, right? It's the disconnection to chemistry. So these sort of bigger questions you're trying to give an answer to.
Yeah, I think that by the way, this didn't come to me naturally. That
Okay.
part, it was very much part of my mentors, how they think
Yeah.
about it. Both my undergrad and my PhD mentors really think about, um, if we're doing a computational work. First of all, we must be rigorous and really uh, use the tools to the capacity, to the capabilities and capacity that it can take us. Right? Uh, we should really not try to get answers that the technique is not. It's not performant enough. Let's put it this way, to give us that answer. And I also think that. I almost don't like the division between computational
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
experimental. If to me it's almost irrelevant because um, quantum mechanics works extremely well, but the reality is that chemistry is still an experimental science, and those two things come together. I am, which is incredible to me, to be a professor at the house of one of the greatest pillars in computational chemistry. We had here John
Yep.
Pople that spent a good chunk of his career here and got the Nobel Prize in chemistry for developing model chemistries, right? And I think that if we look at John Pople's work, although incredibly rigorous and mathematical, um, it you almost, my opinion, of course, can feel that like there was this thinking of, but we need this for to answer questions in the real world, and this is something that I I really 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 try to pass on to my students as well. It's like, it's great that we do all of this, but if it's something that you cannot get in a way that our colleagues, experimentalists, cannot understand, it's
Yep.
pointless. We need to have this deep integration, um, and really think about how these things talk to each other. And at the end of the day, to me and to a good chunk of my group and research program, um, there's no differences. I really don't say, "Oh, this is computational only." No, you know. Um, but like when you're applying for things and submitting
Well,
things and
of
so
course,
on,
there's
there,
some rigors. You need to fall in some buckets, and we all understand that. It's but
yeah,
it's what does it really mean? Why am I doing this? And what kind of answer am I giving? Right? Is it like am I just generating an image in a computer which is very rigorous and very precise, or am I trying to get answer that somebody can take and apply somewhere? Am I advanced the field in any sort of concrete way? That's what everybody should think about when they do chemistry or science in general, regardless, as you say. We shouldn't even speak about theoretical, computational, or wet chemistry or whatever. It's all the same science, isn't it? Just looking at it from different angles.
yeah. And I'll add one more
Yeah.
twist on this, which is, um, during my undergrad, the program that I did had a lot of chunks of industrial chemistry and some
Yeah.
chunks of chemical engineering. And I am now a professor in departments of chemistry and chemical engineering. And the whole idea of learning from different angles is incredible, right? Because like now I am working with these people that have a very different view of the world, but it's really really amazing. And we have these exchanges where um, students coming into my group that have a more chemical engineering background, they have a view that is so amazing for many of the things that we want to do. At the same time, they mix up with the students that come from a more chemistry background. They learn from them, and I learn from my colleagues as well. Um, so I don't know, like divisions. I personally don't like labels, don't like divisions, and I think that this boils down to that. I'm sorry, this was
No, it
confusing.
makes perfect sense. I completely know what you're saying, and I agree. And I agree. It's the diversity is richness, right? It's the way you described it. If you are good enough to get inspiration from different flavors of a same field or from different fields altogether, that's where the biggest leap usually come from. Anyway, I think it would be nice now if you could, because there's a couple of concrete examples of your work that uh, show this sort of multidisciplinarity, right? The way you connect the computational chemistry ideas with the sort of wet chemistry concepts, but it would be nice that if you could start from you describing your work in somehow, and perhaps we can pick one example. I have the one of the cross coupling optimization that you presented at your Talented 12 event. That was an interesting one to me because there was a bit of a connection. But if you have another example, I'd be happy to go wherever you like, really. But let's start from the description of your work from you. That would be better than if I try.
Yeah, let me
Yeah.
try. So, um, and I will speak mostly with regards to where my group is at right now and where we're going, instead of um, revisiting the past. Um, I like to think that we're trying to solve problems in chemistry, chemical sciences, and engineering using computers, and I like to think that we are interested in discovering and optimizing new chemical reactions, new catalysts. After all, we all like to talk about, we had this amazing revolution, information revolution over the past 10, 15 years with the advance of smartphones and so on. But have you ever thought about the amazing technologies that we've had for 200 years of manipulating
Yeah.
atoms, right? That is what like we do as chemical scientists, and specifically when it comes to catalysts, um, it's one of the most powerful engineering tools that we have. It's the tool that allows for us to develop the food to feed the ever-growing population. It's the tool that allows for us to have the medications that saves us from pandemics. It's the tool that allows for us to be having these very podcasts right now with all these silicon and
Yeah.
technologies that we have. And all of that comes from developing new ways of breaking and forming bonds. So that's how I think about our research. So, of course, when it comes to examples like the one you were talking about, so that was a collaboration with Mark, where the idea was there is a complex cross-coupling reaction that had been trying to be optimized by hand using the regular techniques that have been used for many years that have been successful, like design of experiments, but they're still having a hard time. And what was very nice was that Mark has this high throughput robot that they could do reactions in high throughput. So we sought to use a machine learning technique that falls into the class of active learning called Bayesian optimization, where we then parameterize this chemical space in a way that could be represented in these probabilistic models, and then the model goes and learns that hyper surface and basically tells us, okay, the next experiment should be with these variables so that you can learn more or maximize that objective function. And that's how we are tackling problems now. We uh, in my group as well, we're developing Bayesian optimization tools, for example, that incorporate mechanistic information about a given reaction, so that you need fewer and fewer data
Okay.
points to optimize it. Or we're developing inspired by nature and inspired by Pittsburgh native Professor Francis Arnold of Caltech, that develop direct evolution, we have a program, a research program called computational direct evolution that we are using for developing and optimizing catalysts, substrates, to understand how certain enzymes do the reactions that we want them to do, and so on. It's really this blend. And we also have the experimental lab that we're at this point we're building, but we're really a lab that we won't be doing things by hand. It's only with robots that are controlled by either a Bayesian optimizer or a reinforcement learning approach, where we have this deep integration between digital automation, digital chemistry automation, and the realization in real space.
There's a lot there, right? There's so basically the way you're describing, you know, chemical problems are in actual effect so highly multivariate situations, right? Highly multivariate problems that you're trying to solve in some ways. Doing it by a standard design of experiment approach becomes tricky once the number of variables and the control you have over them is, the number of variables, is exponentially growing, and the control you have over them is actually quite limited in many cases, right? So, and you also combine experimental and more and computational sort of data together. So using sort of novel approaches in machine learning, you can actually try and mix a more diverse and heterogeneous type of variables, and probably being able to handle a much bigger ones and limiting the number of experiments you actually need to run, right? Is that a sort of a good summary of the sort of direction you're trying to take here?
Yeah, it is. I will say though that we do have interests that are more fundamental as well. For learning how certain external effects can impact a catalyst, for example. But we are really interested in these deeper questions of how we can accelerate reaction discovery and optimization. We are at the same time that we're doing all of that. It's two points that I'm very, very happy. So I am incredibly lucky to be part of two NSF centers, a phase 2 Center for Computer Assisted Synthesis that it counts with some of my heroes like Abigail Doyle, Matt Sigman, Richmond Sarpong, Jose Nelson, so many other amazing people. And also a phase 1 center, which is the Center for Chemoenzymatic Synthesis, where we're trying to learn how to control enzymes for very specific reactions that we'd like to do, or at the same time learning what are the smallest pieces of information that we can gather and make it to the smallest catalyst possible from those systems. So this is work that we're doing with the incomparable Alison Ryan at University of Michigan, and as well as Scott Miller, John Hartwig, Carl Scheidt. And this is the kind of a thing that I am super enthusiastic and happy to be working on. But then, at the same time, I'm being brought by my engineering colleagues, my chemical engineering colleagues, into things like developing computer vision approaches to be able to count viruses in a sample, viral capsules and capsids, in order to develop viral vaccines, for example, right? So like we are really trying to do things that are quite on the edge, and it's super exciting, really.
Yeah, and having so many different ideas, allow you to just jump from here to there, just never get bored, because you said at the beginning, you tend to get bored very easily. You're not going to get bored very quickly.
Impossible to get bored.
Yeah. They say, I have a couple of questions, when, for what I understand, and I've read about, is growing, right? It's sort of automation in chemistry, the use of robotics, it's an interesting expanding field. it seems to me that people so far have been mostly focusing on the reaction that can be somehow made in compartments, or things that they are very repeatable, that you can standardize in some ways. So it looks, if you look at the chemistry you run that way, and you look at the chemistry that a normal synthetic organic chemist would run routinely, they look kind of different. And I guess you have to deal with the limitations, right, of the automation itself, or maybe because we are at the start of a field, or perhaps because we need to think about chemistry in a different way. Perhaps there will be, as you automate these things and then you start using machine learning, perhaps chemistry will look different in a few years from now. What is the way to kind of interpret this, in your opinion?
Yeah. So something that I think all the time is that there's no way of not having very specialized skills and hardware to perform the kind of reactions that you are describing, that are mostly done by highly skilled organic chemists, for example. And that's okay. That's okay, because there's a lot of things that we can automate that will allow these highly skilled organic
I see where you're
chemists
going.
to do more
That makes
complex
sense.
problems, right? So that's fine. But but what I do believe strongly is that um, I don't think that we should be trying to automate uh, things in the same way that we do things by hand nowadays. That is the part that doesn't make much sense to me. Because if we're going through the trouble of automating something, we should make the best out of the tools that we have, instead of like how we do things
Yeah,
nowadays.
makes total
So
sense. Uh, which is
I think that the way that we should be thinking more and more and more about is the way that Kerry Gilmore at University of Connecticut has been thinking about with his design for radio flow synthesizers. Kerry and I are friends and collaborators, and that's the kind of also hardware that we're going to have here. That Kerry has many there, where it's a different way of thinking how you do the chemistry, right? Flow chemistry is not a brand new. Kerry didn't invent this, but Kerry invented this particular design that allows for much more complex chemical reactions.
definitely. Well, flow chemistry offers some advantages, right? For hazardous reactions, it's kind of easier to scale up in some ways, but very often it needs a lot of, like catalysis in general, right? It needs a lot of optimization to really perform the way it should. It's not something that you plug and play,
Hence
right?
why
That's why.
hence why Bayesian optimization, and we're
Yeah,
working
and
together.
and so the way you are describing it is not that the future is going to be robots replacing humans in labs doing chemistry. It's that you can actually combine the two. There are problems that you can tackle with automation, and there are things that a skilled organic chemist will still be probably the best way to go, at least in the medium term, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, that is the vision that we have here at CMU. Um, that's CMU is about to. Sorry, dude.
Oh, it's fine. My son is having a tantrum, son. Don't worry. Carry on. Carry on.
Okay. Okay, so what I was saying is like it's the vision we have at CMU, the automation physical sciences. CMU will inaugurate next year the very first academic cloud lab in the world. It's a $45 million investment where you submit your experiment or set of experiments as code, and it will be performed by a mix of people and machines. And this democratizes science. Imagine that you can't be in the lab for so many hours because maybe you have to take care of a loved one, or maybe you unfortunately cannot operate
Yeah.
in that lab. Now you can still perform experiments. So it's this mix of people and machines performing these experiments, and this is a venture that is out of in collaboration with a company called Emerald Cloud Labs that was formed by two CMU alum, and they are already operational in California with this schema of you submit your experiments as code, and it's performed by a mix of people and machines. And I think that this idea will become larger and larger. ACM using is investing in this so that we can expand uh, who will have access to performing these experiments or any experiments that they would like.
With a work like this, the work that you're doing, and the people you collaborate with, and in general in the field, and with results like that we are having with in the protein folding prediction, for example, with Google,
Yeah.
all these are mind-blowing things. Do you think chemistry is at the verge of a revolution? Is chemistry going to look significantly different from in 5-10 years time or something?
No doubt. I have no doubt. I don't know if we're gonna see it as something like, and one day we woke up and it's completely different. It's not
Yeah.
like that, right? But certainly in 5 to 10 years, it will be much more digital for sure, and much more computers will play a much bigger role. And we see things that are fantastic, like AlphaFold that you're describing, and more recent like ESM Fold by the folks at Meta. Uh, we we are really, at least on that part, it is revolutionary. No doubt about it. We are using those tools in our group for research that uh, a year ago or 2 years ago I would never even think that we would be able to tackle. That's amazing. Um, Now imagine, what else will come in the next few years. It's actually hard to imagine, but even with what we have now, with these large language models, you may have seen Chat GPT that has been going the rounds on social media. It's a really amazing and fun tool, but we must be careful because a lot of these models give you something with such confidence that you may not even think, is this right or not, right? So that's where skilled and well-trained scientists would have a role, is being able to discern fact from
Yeah.
fiction. Um, and that's something that I am curious to see how we are
But
going to
we'll
handle.
see. 10 years, we're young enough. We'll still be around, right? Well, you'll probably you'll
Yeah,
probably have an active part in it. You'll probably be just more of an observer, but still curious. Anyway, yeah, the way you're describing it, obviously, you like the challenge, you like the problem. You're probably a problem solver, right? That's in your intimate. I'm just curious. Is what takes you out of bed? Is it the challenge itself? Is the sort of knowledge that you can crack a very difficult problem, or is it knowing that what your solution might potentially uh, mean to the real world? What is really your ultimate driver?
I think I think it has changed as I've been changing,
Hmm.
uh, as I've been aging, and also my role has changed. Before it was like this um, immense drive of knowing what is the results I'll be able to get. That I could be the first person in the world to learn about
Yeah, the problem.
something,
Yeah,
and
cracking the
there's
challenge.
nothing
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Cracking the challenge, yeah. And that remains, but now it's a little bit different because it's more about um, training
yeah.
these
So
people that will be on the driver's seat on that, and learning from them and seeing them grow. It's just it's blissful when you see them have these step functions in learning and growing and thinking and cracking those problems. It's just so rewarding to train the next generation. But at the same time, we have to we have to act fast, right? We have to be able to develop a lot of these tools in order to guarantee a cleaner, more sustainable future for the generations that will come after us. And that is something that I do think a lot about, and sometimes I get very nervous because it's like, okay, we're not being fast enough, but there is this immense sense of training these folks at the same time learning what what challenges are they able to solve, and how can our solutions and ideas help to accelerate how we discover materials that will keep us from climate catastrophe.
It's very interesting. I like to hear that, and it's you'd be surprised, but it's fairly common. In a lot of great scientists, they start with like being problem solving, really fixated about the problems, and as they grow, it starts being more of a mission. Right? Say, hey, this is meaningful. I can actually change the world, or very often as a follow-up or together or in different phases, it's the people. Hey, I can have an impact on the new students. I can actually make a difference in their life. It's great. I mean, it's great, and I don't think we speak enough about that. How important the role of people like you is for the real world, because you can crack problems that could actually make the world better, but also for the lives of so many people that you kind of meet and work with you or for you, and you train and educate it. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I love that you actually sort of rationalize that, and it's part of what you are. Uh,
Yeah, let me just correct you one little thing that you said,
Please.
that work for me. No one works for me. We work together.
Thanks. That makes it
I
much
just
better. Yes, you're absolutely right.
it's a small thing, but it's a thing that I and it's not just because that's the right thing to do and to be, but also and this is important in the training process, that people feel the responsibility about the problems they're trying to solve and ownership about it, right? And it's you're not working for me, it we're working
We're working
together,
together on
right?
something. Yeah, that's and it's going back to what you were saying at the beginning. It's sort of the team spirit, right? This chemistry between people, and it's so important to you. It's great to hear, and that's a perfect segue to my final question, which is always the same. Yeah, now that you've grown up, you're still young, and there's a lot ahead of you, but you are also in a position to be able to support others, right? So what would be the single piece of advice you'd give to someone who's just starting in their career?
um yeah, I think that first and foremost, keep an open mind, and really try to learn from others, from other fields, uh, from your colleagues, um, from literature, from not just try to really see what other areas might need that you can bring to them. So this open mindedness, I think it's important. Um, but I also think that whatever you do, try to be kind to others, to yourself. In our field, in academia and science in general, it's very easy to fall into traps that relate to imposter syndrome, or relentless attraction. And I just I just don't think that's a healthy way of trying to do things. Um, and this is perhaps for myself too. Like I'm saying this, but imposter syndrome is something that I have every day, and I still think that I'm I'm not good enough to be here and shouldn't be here. And uh, kindness to self, I think it's something that you should have. And Try to don't. The last thing I would say is like, yeah, seeing what's going on now, it's great, but you should also be trying to see what's coming next, and that's hard. That's just hard. But I would say that, like, try to see what's coming next. That open mindedness will lead you to it.
Gabe, thanks so much. It was a great way to ending our chat. It's been great chatting to you. I learned a ton, and it's been good fun. I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. This was really, really great. I loved it.
Thanks, mate. Thanks.